You are listening to the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast, where you discover management insights and strategies for your successful dental practice. There are also interviews with key people in the industry who have advice and services to help you and your team achieve great success. Welcome to this episode of the Julie Parker Practice Success Podcast. And today I've got a guest all the way over from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce her. Carolyn Boldt, co-founder of CrossFields Interiors and Architecture. Welcome, Carolyn.
Thank you for having me, Julie.
It's an absolute delight. And your topic that you're going to be speaking about today has been something that's come up in my world a number of occasions over the last a few months now, just that we need to start paying a little bit more attention to the design of our workplaces. And, the audience here is dental practices, but this is your work. You go into health practices and assist them with design. Is that correct?
That is absolutely what we do. Yes.
Wonderful. Tell us a little bit about how you came into co-founding CrossFields Interiors and Architecture, first of all.
Well, my background is I'm an interior architectural designer, and my husband and I were doing work together in the Atlanta area, and we started working in 2003, 2004 for Life University, which is a chiropractic college. At the time, they were in not a very good shape. They'd almost lost their accreditation. So we got involved in helping them revamp all of their facilities. And our background, like my husband and I, is all corporate, although we've done financials, et cetera, but always larger businesses. So we were involved in that. And through the process of working with Life over that years, we just got very immersed in beginning to understand the business of holistic health and specifically chiropractors and their struggles and their challenges, and also how they work, just intricacies of how they actually see patients, et cetera. So became pretty much experts at that. And then in 2008 or so, we were still working at Life and realized a couple of things. One, the economy got kind of shaky. And the other thing we realized is that 80% of our business was at Life University. And that was not a really safe place to be. And about that time, my chiropractor had a doctor opening an office around the corner, and I was already, my husband and I are very focused on holistic and health practice and all of that anyway. So he was like, why don't you help him open? And so it organically happened that I got to help him, and I fell in love with helping the smaller office, the smaller doctor, the dream and his vision, and very different than working corporate. And that was 2009, and he gave us the name to somebody else. And then Life University asked us to actually create a class to teach chiropractors on the impact their office design has on their success, which is what we talk about today. And that was 2010. So just out of that and the economy, and I got exposed to a book that I highly recommend called The E-Myth, and Michael Gerber, and my husband and I read it and realized that we did not have a business. We owned our job. So we were the classic, what does he call it? The expert technician that had an entrepreneurial seizure. So we were very, very good at what we did, but we didn't know anything about business. So, so we decided to figure out how we could create something that was duplicatable, transferable, scalable, words that we'd never really heard before. And all of that merging together with this class, et cetera, we said, let's try to create a product of design, but to actually do custom design for these smaller doctors. And there weren't enough in Atlanta, so we knew we had to go virtual. This was 2011. So we decided we had to go virtual with our designing. How could we do that? How could we create more standardized scopes of services so that they were packages of sort that people bought? Still custom design, but what they delivered in them was standardized, so it wasn't such a big deal. And we could run projects through faster and teach other designers, et cetera, et cetera. So we had this vision and started with a Facebook blog and a blog and a Facebook post. So, and it grew and it started to take over our other practice. And we, that's what we do. So that's all we do now. And so we've gone beyond just pure chiropractic. Um, a couple of reasons. One, most of our chiropractors do more than chiropractic. So we were learning physical therapy, we were learning regenerative medicine, we learned wellness, we've learned all of those, but still really staying within that unique alternative practice. We haven't done a lot of dental offices, although it crosses over, but just my message can go to any practitioner that has any kind of office. That the main thing that our focus is that your space, and we talked about this in the beginning, your space will impact your success in two ways. One, it needs to be efficient, so your operations run beautifully and the space and the flow work. So we call that form follows function. So that's the function of the space. And then the other part of it is the form, which is attracting and retaining patients. Because the practitioners today, especially holistic healthcare practitioners, they have to attract patients. Patients, they're in sales, they're in marketing, and so that piece of being in sales and marketing, your office environment can either support that marketing effort or it's going to be detrimental to it. So that's our message that I'm getting out.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I love that form follows function, because it needs to be a space where not just the patients have an enjoyable flow throughout the practice, but as you were talking about before too, the teams have this efficiency that the space is working for them, not against them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
speaking about dental practices, that's all I know from for an intimate way is when I first became a dental assistant back in the late 80s. Of course, a lot of dental practices were converted homes. And
Oh,
because of
wow.
that presented its own challenges. And, it's just so important to be able to design your space with your vision in mind. So back in those days, you would just convert the bedrooms into surgeries and you convert the lounge room into a waiting room. And you'd put up a reception desk, and it worked very well because at that time, you were just really just doing the dentistry in the traditional way. As we've evolved over time, now we've got hygiene rooms, which are kitted out sometimes a little bit differently to the dental surgeries. We've also got minor rooms, mini rooms for discussions with patients, also others with OPG machines, LATSEF machines in them, and more currently, I've been hearing about some of the the specialists who are involved in oral surgery, having hyperbaric chamber therapy rooms, and so they've got a hyperbaric chamber within their practice to aid in the healing of their patients as well. And then we've got storage space. We need storage for our scanners and storage for all of our equipment and all of our IT stuff as well. Now, back in the day, we didn't have computers. Then we got computers, but then we needed these huge storage lockers with bits and pieces of the computers in there. And so the needs and requirements of dental surgeries just by themselves have really evolved over time. And so to get somebody in that really understands workflow is enormously important.
Yes, yes, it's very much so. And everything you've described, I can see that transfer over to, you know, a lot of practitioners just as technology changes. I mean, the technology change has eliminated the need for all the files. Remember all the
Yeah.
folder files and all the high density files and all of that? You don't see that very often anymore. And if we see it at all, it's an older practice that someone's buying and they have to keep the files. But even those are being digitized. You know, you just don't see them like you used to. So, and the touch screens to check in now versus, you maybe have less people up front and more in the back serving. And yeah, just the whole evolution. It's funny you said that about dentists. My dentist is in an old house. It's almost 200-year-old Victorian type home in downtown little community that I live at, bedroom community of Atlanta. And he was he was talking about the last time I was in there, he was just talking about how everything is really tight and cramped because he can't add anything to it because it's an old historic home. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. But
I still remember when I was a dental rep for a very short failing time. I was not good at it. There was a practice in western suburbs here in Melbourne, Australia, and the front door, it was like a shop front, but it was a very mini shop front. But you opened the door and it banged into the operatory chair, the foot of the operatory chair. So I'm like, this is really tight fitted here. It's amazing how
oh
some
my,
people kind of make things work.
yeah. Well, it makes it work, and it was funny having that conversation with him. Was he's got a thriving practice. It was his father's practice, so he's building upon that, and he's right. He's on the main square strip, and everyone knows him, and just great referral practice, wonderful referral practice, and great dentist. So you have those two combinations, and great staff, and all of that. That the compromise is that he's not as efficient.
Yeah.
He's not as efficient in his space because it's tight and it's not. But if he didn't have all of those other things going for him, it would probably be much more of a critical decision to, do I stay in this space? What do I do to stay in this space? So, but he was even saying, because I really, the odds of me moving, or not the odds, but the downside of me moving from this historic, I've been here forever kind of space is probably way outweighs the efficiencies I would get right now. So at least at this moment, at least at this moment.
It would be like, for the patients, it would be like their parents selling their family home. I don't live there anymore, but why are you doing it?
So it's crazy. It's crazy, but he's definitely locked. He can't grow,
Yeah.
So if he wanted to grow more than he's growing, but he's good. Everyone has to weigh out where they are, what they need to do, what do they want to do to grow, and so he's just open a lot of hours, so that he can,
Yeah.
has another dentist in there working with him now to, that's how he's growing. So anyway, that's as much as I know, but about operations, yes, operations. So the function of your space and the flow, as we were talking about, it's like uh, production assembly type things. No, it's people, it's service, all of that. But when you can reach and grab and things can go faster and things are where they need to be and people don't have to, stop as you're passing each other in the hallway because the hallway is wide enough. Just little things that
Yeah.
can stop and slow down your growth or impede your operation efficiencies. Yes, very much so.
And certainly getting it right from the start is just so important. You may not have to kit out every part of the space at the start, but allowing those treatment rooms, I'm just imagining when you are first opening up a dental practice from scratch, or you're relocating to a brand new premises and it's being purpose built by you guys and designed by you guys, then you will tend to design it in a way that suits your space right now and your activities right now. But you're going to be there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. You're going to want to sell it one day to somebody else who's going to come in with critical eyes as to, is this going to serve my long-term purpose as well? The vision has to play an enormous role in how you design that space.
Yes, yes, very much so. And designing, you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it should be part of your business plan of how you're going to grow. And most practitioners, you have the choice. Do you rent a space? We may even talk about, you rent a space, you buy a space. Obviously, when you rent a space, there's the idea that it's not necessarily going to be permanent. It's going to be potentially temporary, although we work with doctors that have been in a space for 20 years, because just renting, because there were so many other things that worked in their favor. But, making that decision of how much money you're going to put into the space has a lot to do with how long you're going to stay there. And, how you're going to, there's so many decisions. Is
Yeah.
it already built out? Can I work with what's built out? How much do I modify it? Can I start from scratch? There's There's a lot of decisions if you're looking at.
Yeah, a challenge that I've recently had with somebody is that she's grown out of her space. She has been renting it. Just a couple of years ago, she tried to modify it so it could accommodate more activity. It's just not going to work. And so she's wanting to break the lease and go elsewhere, but then she has to bring that space back to the way it was when she moved in. And so whatever changes you do go to when you rent the space, you may have to reverse that, go to the expense of reversing them as well.
She's probably having to do that because she is breaking the lease, right? So if you're not breaking the lease, that's not as common. But if you're
Yeah.
breaking a lease, yeah. So the cost of, yeah, there's a lot of things to weigh. You just have to weigh all the, you know, we call it you have to weigh your compromises. There's critical things, that you can't have them all, so you have to put them in some kind of order. The three big ones we talk about when we're doing spaces is the cost, the what we call the scope of work or the scope of design, like what all is going to be involved in that, and then time.
Time.
So if
Yep.
you're really crunched on time, you're not going to get as high a level of scope, and it's going to cost you more money. If you're
Yep.
really focused on money, you need to give yourself more time, and you need to not have as high a scope. If your scope is really high, it's like which one of those three? You can't have all three.
You
You
can't have it
can't.
all. That's right. There's going to be compromise there somewhere. So you decide where you want to compromise. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. And and those are weighed against your ultimate goal. So if you're a startup, 90% of the time it's just cost. You just got to figure out how to get open for the lowest price you can get open. And then probably time comes in there because the clock's ticking. And then you think about the scope. But as I tell our startups and our students and the people I do classes for and stuff, it's like quality design just has to be well thought through. It does not have to be expensive.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be expensive to get a wow. It just has to be thought through and well designed. And if we go into that level of, we've been talking about form follows function, we've been function, but then the form is the aesthetic appeal of that space. And if you want to talk about that, that goes into how you're attracting and retaining patients and how that can work for you. I love that you work in dentistry because you've worked in it long enough to see the evolution of the dentist that was just whatever that office space laid out to as competition grew. One of the things that changed was the design of the dentist spaces.
Mm.
And when we first started out doing chiropractors, I used to tell our chiropractors, this was 12 years ago, go look for images of things that you like, that represent, that's kind of our vision boards that we're having you create that represent what you're thinking so that we can dig into it a lot more. And I would tell them, I said, don't go look for chiropractic offices because you're not going to find any but go look for dental offices because they're good looking. Yeah. And and I remember 20 years ago when they weren't. So it's really a model in some ways that we patterned what we're doing now off of is that.
And I guess that's one of the many benefits of competition, isn't it? It's just raising the bar for all of us.
Raising the bar.
Because without that level of competitions, dental practices as well would have just kind of stayed the way they were. But of course, there's been enough dentists to cater to crowds for a long period of time. But chiropractic started off small, and as demand grew, of course, more and more came into the industry. So now they're going through that competitive space as well. And I agree with you, and I would love to talk about this a bit more, about how that space can attract clients to you, but also, if you don't do it well, how it can disappoint your clients as well. That all of your marketing is providing some level of expectation in those potential new patients' minds. And then when they walk in your front doors, what you see is wildly different to their website, Facebook page, and all of their advertising.
And they don't even think about it. If they don't think about it, if you confuse, you lose. If anyone's ever heard that. And when someone walks into a space, well, let me use. I talk about retail design and hospitality design a lot because there's definitely healthcare design. Healthcare design has to meet certain standards. It has to meet some flow. It has, you know, there's criteria to the making the function of the healthcare work. But then when you think about retail design, it's very much focused on the brand and the vision that
Yeah.
people walk in. And when you go to a retail environment, if the environment that you're going shopping in does not match the product that you're going shopping for, there's going to be a disconnect and you're going to have a harder time. And there's studies on those stores that start to change that model a little bit and how that didn't work. And, you know, I don't need to go off into all of that. But the point is that you're right. You've got this, you spend this money on this website. And if you work with a quality website designer brand, they're going to talk about your brand, which is not your logo. It's how you show up and how you want to be identified and how you want your persona to show up. And there's design elements that will support that, right? Just like there's design elements in the logo, whether it's the color or the font or any of those things in crafting a website. Well, it's the same thing in an interior space. Is there's psychology of those parts and pieces, and that expectation when people walk in, it needs to match that whole flow all the way through. Then the other thing we bring in hospitality design. So hospitality design is very critical in what I would consider a patient care type space, because those patients, first off, they're going to walk in and you want to know, like, and then trust you, right? So you need to build that trust. So if it's not congruent, it's going to start to disrupt that trust. But then when they're in the space for a while, they need to feel comfortable and they need to grow in that trust area, right? So if you think about hospitality design, think about going to your favorite restaurant, or you're going to go out to dinner with your husband and you talk about where are we going to go eat. You think about the food, but you also think about that environment. What kind of environment do we want to create? So interior design creates that environment. Interior architecture creates it. It's not just the colors on the wall. It's the height of the ceiling or the lowness of the ceiling or the structure around you. That's why it's more architecture than just the decorating. And all of those things have a psychology that is adding to what that person, it creates behavior for those people that are in that space. So you want to be intentional about it so that your environment supports whatever that behavior is you want your patients to have. And so it's marketing and it's continued. So we talk about attracting and retaining. So the culture
and retaining. Big difference. And as you were talking about that, it kind of brought to my mind, I love using analogies to help us understand concepts more clearly because we can get very stuck in our industry and our space and it's difficult to break out of that. But, for example, if I went on a dating website and I read the profile, so in essence the website of a particular person, and I thought, yeah, he looks fantastic. He looks all great. He's, into holistic health. He shares the same kind of values as I do. He's saying all the right things, appears wonderful. And so I think this guy looks pretty good. And we end up going on a date and then going back to his place afterwards. Now, if I walk into his place, and despite the good impression I got, it's all messy. It's a tight squeeze, like he made it seem like that he had a larger place, all the things. If that image, if that experience doesn't match how he proposed himself to be, marketed himself to be, instant distrust. Then all of a sudden, rather than I'm excited now, I'm looking for other evidence that he might be being a little bit disingenuous with me. And I think, dental practices can think, oh, it's okay that our website, for example, has images of somebody else's dental practice and somebody else's people. and it makes it look like it's this beautiful, pristine place. And I don't have to make my place look good because when patients do arrive, they hang around. But think of what the alternative would be. They turn up to an appointment time that they've already made, they've put aside a time for, and then they walk in. Are they really going to turn around and say, this doesn't match, I'm turning around and walking out? No, they'll just have an internal, sometimes subconscious break in trust. And so they'll certainly hang around for the appointment time, but they'll be disappointed. And so really making sure that the competitive nature of dentistry now with chiropractic as well and many other industries as well, we really do have to take that side of things very important. What's going on for that patient psychologically? The need for trust in health is enormous. And like restaurants, it's too easy to go to the other one down the road if I don't feel this one's completely meshing with me.
Yes, 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 very much, very much. And to add to that, this is kind of a segue, is if you're looking at buying a practice, I just want to talk about that a second.
Yeah, please.
One of the things that you look at is their patient base and all of that. And a lot of times we'll have people come to us, or the brokers come to us and say, could you help this patient or this doctor improve the look of his space? Because yes, he's got a great patient base, but he's not going to get any new patients. Do you know what I'm saying? Because they've just been coming to him because it's worn out. There's duct tape on the exam tables. I mean, whatever. And so they don't want to put money into it, but yet their price at the sale of their practice is going to be discounted considerably because of the image. And they have to weigh that out. Maybe they go into it and say, kind of like you buy it as is house versus I'm going to have the stylist come in and I'm going to paint the walls. I'm going to make sure everything cleaned up. It's amazing how much more money you get for that house. So it's just that simplicity of an impression. And then the other thing that we've seen is that doctors will have patients start to refer once the space is redone. So they're happy coming to that doctor because they've been coming for a long time and they're comfortable with it. But now the space has been revised, and it's like, wow, I want to tell all my all my clients to come here, my friends to come here. And referrals.
That's interesting. Yeah,
very much so. And then the other thing is that we're designing for our ideal patient. Okay, so if you are and I'm going to speak to dentists. I'm going to call it like a bread and butter family dentist. Okay. And you're not going to do high end cosmetic surgery. And there's not a lot of stuff it's just, the basics of stuff. Then your space needs to match that versus if you're going to be a lot of cosmetic and choices and high dollar things, your space needs to match who you're trying to attract, if you want to follow what I'm saying, because they're going to buy based on what your price point of what you're selling needs to match your environment, is what I want to say.
Absolutely. And over the last few years, there has been a practice that I've seen that have completely renovated. And one of their existing patients came into the new space, and I was standing there in the practice when this person came in because we're all excited, look at the new space, saying to all the patients that were coming, how do you like it? How do you like it? And one of these patients said, and the interior was beautiful, just beautiful. It went from very much family dentist environment, still glorious, it was still beautiful, but then went up a few levels into this really lovely space. And this patient said, oh gosh, I feel like I've underdressed to come here. I don't feel like I belong here anymore. And so you really do have to match it with what you're offering.
You do. I have a story of a chiropractor that we did his office, and he was moving out of just straight chiropractic and moving more into functional medicine and physical therapy, and so he wanted a whole new environment, et cetera, and he was buying a building. And one of his older patients, not older, but longer patients, so first thing she said is, are your prices going to go up? Because he looked more expensive, So,
and they're looking for that. They're looking at their bills all of a sudden.
Yeah. So, and he said, well, not for you.
A perfect answer. Not for you. That's
not
wonderful.
For you. But, he's trying to raise your gain. And I mean, yeah, I've got lots of stories of that. There's doctors that come to us that are, one that I've got some testimonies on our website. He was in a university town, had kind of a family practice, good old country environment to his office, and he got a certification, a specialty degree in functional neurology, very much
Hmm.
brain focused, very, very higher end of what practice he could do. And so he had to change his look and his practice just to match all of that. And then he was able, because he was doing the functional neurology in his older practice, but nobody would pay for it. He changed his environment, and now people would pay for it. It's fascinating. It's psychology. It's psychology.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so you use that in business, use it in marketing. It's marketing. So.
Yeah. That's it. That's it. So, what are some of the things that you do classically find practices doing wrong in terms of design? What ideas do you come in with that they say, "Oh, I never thought of it that way before"?
Um, wow, I don't know if there's a one thing, but what
Yeah.
we do with our doctors is we really try to partner with them is the best. That's one of our values is to partner because we're not going to tell them how to practice. We want to understand how they practice. That's not our specialty. There's plenty of business coaches out there to teach them how to practice better. And they all practice differently. And you know that working from them, they all have a little, there's definitely similarities, but they all have a little bit of a different tweak on how, and that's their individuality, right? So one of the things that we see that doctors don't do is they don't really explore all the possibilities before they start to finalize the design of a space. So one of the things that we specialize in, and you know, it's part of what we call our due diligence, is that when people are looking for space, before they look for space, they really figure out exactly how many square feet they need before they sign the lease or before they buy the space through very, you know, we call it a discovery call, and it actually goes through the process of how many exam bays they have, et cetera, to come up with their square footage, because we have so many of them sign the lease or put a contract on a building or something, and then they think about what they want to do with it, or they think they know, but they haven't really quantified it. It's not like they don't know it
Mm.
all, they just haven't really quantified it. So when they start to quantify how much square footage they need to do what they need to do, they may find out that they can't really do the practice that they want to do in that space, and it's very disappointing. So that's one of the things we hope that practitioners will do. Will really do. It's part of the due diligence process to figure out. You're figuring out your requirements, we call it, for your space. So it's function and form. So functionally, what do you need square footage wise, and then aesthetically, what do you need? What aesthetically are you going to go after? Because you can't always change the curb appeal to the building, so you want to make sure that that matches, etc. So that's one of the mistakes we see practitioners. They come too late. They start too late.
Mhm.
Another thing that they'll do is, our challenge is that the landlord's architects a lot of times will, and no criticism to the landlord architect. I was one once in my life, and that was my job. But they have very little bit of time because the landlord is paying for that architect, so it's more of a commodity. So the landlord's architects don't have the time to put into exploring all the different ways the space can be laid out. But it's included in the lease, so it's free. So you get what you pay for, right? So
Yeah.
and sometimes that's important. Sometimes that, especially with startups and everything, use whatever kind of resources you can get. Just understand what you're losing in the process or what you're not gaining, I'll say. So that's a couple of
Mm.
things when people are opening offices. As far as practices that are existing, we have a free resource that your listeners can have. That's our 5-point designer checklist. And what it literally is the first 5 things that we would look at when we look at an image of a practice, without considering any kind of functional changes. Okay, just considering the first impression. And so that's a free resource they can get. But just to give you a summary of it, is we tell our practitioners to first, you can't do it. You're not the one that's going to walk through this space and evaluate it because you're too close. It's the law of familiarity, and you're just not going to see it. So you need to find someone that you trust. Ideally, there's someone just like your ideal patient or an ideal patient that you say, will you walk through the space with me? I'll use my checklist. I'm going to be so totally open to your critique and let's go through it. And then this
Yeah.
checklist actually walks them through these 5 things. And the first one is it cluttered? Is it dirty? And is it cluttered? And it's amazing how offensive that is, where you just end up with I love offices where you've got some kind of promotion going on or something, and the whole front desk is just full of brochures.
Yeah.
And nobody sees anything because it's just full, right? And it's not that no one ever sees it, but it's just you're not giving anything a focus. Do one a month or one, whatever. I know goodness people don't come every month, but you get the picture. So clutter, and then are things dirty and dated and worn out? Do the walls need painting? And then are things out of date? And then we look at lighting and basically I was saying that and dated stuff that are dated and things that how do you get because if you walk into space that's very dated and things are going to date every 7 to 10 years, so more than likely there's something in there that's dated. So those are kind of the things to start with.
I just love that idea of getting one of your long-term ideal patients to walk with you throughout the practice and highlight what they, things that come to their eyes. It's amazing. Because one of the other things that I think, is when you have that space beautifully designed, and then you go back in a few weeks or months later on and they've all of a sudden put posters up and they've got the brochures everywhere and they're no longer putting flowers out. You think, it's coming back. Leave it at that beautiful design space that you intended in the first place. But we get so used to what we see that we can sometimes, kind of lose the vision a little bit about we created this space for a reason. Let's try to maintain it. And again, having that kind of regular fresh eyes coming through is a really good idea.
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah.
So with your space being able to be virtual due to all of the COVID situation, you flipped it more virtual. Do you just work with health practices in America, in the United States, or do you also work beyond those borders?
We do work all over because we're virtual, right? We do work all over. And we were virtual in 2011. Okay.
So you were early on.
Yeah, because, we knew when we started this, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our business story. We knew that if we were going to focus on this little bitty niche to start with, there wasn't enough in our vicinity for us to not figure out a way to go virtual. So we've been doing design virtually for all that time. And then about 2020, all of our design staff went virtual. And so, yeah, we're all virtual now. But, we used to be in an office together, but we're working with virtual clients. So, yes, we do it all over, anywhere that we can batch the time zones up, as we could talk about. I know that, there's differences in money exchanges and stuff that can be challenging. So one of the things that we pride ourselves in is that initial design assessment stuff, and then we can get that going, and then you can hire local firms to take that and run. And you do that somewhat because of finances, because of the money exchanges, et cetera. The other thing is because we're a full architecture, interiors, and engineering firm in the United States, we're not licensed for architecture and engineering outside of the United States. So we do bring in local engineers and the architect for that licensing piece. The interior piece doesn't have to be licensed the same way as the architecture piece does.
Oh gosh, you're all structured and set up for it all. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
If there are dental practices out there going, I'm really interested, what range, if they've got an established practice, can you help them? If they've got a converted home that they want to do something with, can you help them? And certainly you can help them from startups as well, or from a fresh lay of land.
Fresh land, yeah. So we basically have two, we have one-on-one service, and it's one-on-one. You have one designer that works with you the entire time, and we have steps we take them through. I was telling you a little bit about, we have step one where we're figuring out how much space you need, and then step two, figuring out how that space will work for you. And then 3, 4, and 5 have to do with construction drawings, et cetera. And then 6 has to do with overseeing the construction from a design standpoint. We do that for for new builds are, we do ground up also, but the majority of them are interior fit out, interior build outs. We also do what we call facelifts or renovations.
Nice.
So we have, and some just need, and in our world we call it paint and powder, but they just need the refreshing of the space, right? They don't really need a lot of functional changes, and then some need functional changes. So yeah, we'll work with established startups, etc. And then, as I was saying, we have a lot of online services, online products. So we try to cover everything in the niche that we can do. So.
Fantastic. And we're going to have all of your contact details and website, which is crossfieldsdesign.com.
Yes.
And we do encourage everyone to go to that website. Is that where they also access their 5-point designer checklist?
Yeah, so if you do crossfieldsdesign.com/listeners, and I'll make sure I email that to you for the show notes and stuff, that'll go straight to that 5-point checklist. So they don't have to dig around and look for it. And
Sure.
that'll be a download. It's a free download that they get. And then, yes, we get to send you our newsletters in exchange.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
it.
It's such a crucial aspect of the success of a dental practice. I know that dentists out there feel like they have to be successful in so many different areas to be ultimately successful, but this is really so very important. And when you start to think about yourself as a consumer walking into a restaurant for the first time that you've already done some research about, and then once you're in there, if it's difficult to find the bathroom and you kind of move from this area, from the bar to the eating area is all complicated and you're walking around tables, as opposed to a very purpose-built functional space where it's aesthetically exactly what's going to be tied in with all the marketing, what your expectations have been. Just think of yourself as a consumer and you can start to recognise the importance of getting the space right for yourself and your dental practices as well, because I agree, even with your existing patients, they will just keep returning for sure. It doesn't mean they're 100% satisfied with the way the place is getting a little bit run down, etc. And I feel a little guilty because when I had my practice, I was in that category of going, oh, we can just leave that shabby looking carpet area at the front door the way it is. No big deal. We've got more important things to spend our money on. But this is where the fresh eyes coming in can go, no. That's actually really, that's first impression stuff. We've got to really make sure we look after that. And so we need these other perspectives to come into our world to make sure we're prioritising our expenditure and attention and energy in the right way as well.
Very much so. Very much so. Yeah, very well said.
Well, thank you so much for coming on today and talking about this element of things. You've really brought it back up into my mind in the attention, that we do need to focus on these areas. And so I'll be going into different dental practices over the coming weeks and months with different eyes as well. And as I say, we encourage you, dental practices out there, to contact Carolyn, contact CrossFields Interiors and Architecture, and just start broadening out your perspective. Maybe this is one of the key elements that you can then do some refinement around and start making a difference to your existing patients in the way you're attracting new patients. Carolyn, you've been magnificent. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Julie. It's been fun.
If you enjoyed this podcast, then I encourage you to head over to Amina and my website, dentalbusinessmastery.com.au. You will find all the information that you need if you would like to gain our assistance in helping you and your team achieve great success. We've got online courses, consulting programs, the club membership. We also have a whole bunch of tools and resources that are available for free that will help you achieve your practice goals. If you would like to find out more, you can also email us directly at info@dentalbusinessmastery.com.au. Thanks so much for listening.